Hi, welcome to Between Flights. First book review of reads you find around the airport. You're traveling, you see something, or you're an employee and just need to kill time between planes or whatever. So, it's those books you see kind of floating around, kind of wondering whether you like it, won't like it, or not. Background. Don't really want to give my name away. Company I work for, if you can tell by the tie, if you can really tell by clues and so forth of the company I work for, and the color and so forth. Brand name clothing is called Edwards. They come with a low vest, gray. I push wheelchairs around, and sometimes between planes and so forth. I like to pick up something to read. So kind of the background, we're not all the same. Some people would go for King, Patterson, or Crichton. I call them the trifecta of evil. I tend to favor more science fiction books. I haven't read anything by Terry Brooks yet. I found one book that was sitting on a trash can by him, surprisingly from England. That's in a future episode. Sometimes I'll bring something from my personal collection, like a Doctor Who book. But usually most books are something I find around the airport. First one, no exception. Probably the exception in this one. I tend to lean more to science fiction and so forth, but this one, it's a note in history. It was one of those things that was skimmed over in history class. You may have heard the anthem from the Marines sing it, but it's called Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates by Brian Kilmeade and Don Yeager. Everyone forgets Don Yeager, so I should give him his 2 cents. But I should also go a little more into what kind of books you might be expecting, political-wise. Nothing liberal, despite most of the bookstores having that liberal bent. I do see the occasional Riley book and so forth, but nothing really conservative. No Laura Ingraham or probably Bill O'Reilly's history books are all I pretty much see. Nothing from Ann Coulter I live in a pretty much liberal state. I looked at our voting map and it was pretty much red. Few blue counties, but the rest of the state was red. So I kind of know what kind of people our electors are in Minnesota. They are more concerned with numbers than covering the spread. So we'll just leave it at that. But kind of wanted to get back to what I wanted to talk about, and we are going to talk about Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. So, of course, my first experience or knowledge, probably first-hand knowledge, was an episode of G.I. Joe from back in the day when I do remember the scene, Flint and Lady Jane tied up. Well, not tied up that way, but those two were stooping each other, as a popular DJ would say, but they started singing the theme of the Marines anthem that goes from the halls of Montezuma to the to the shores of Tripoli. Yeah, they do have some nice looking women in that Tripoli area. But Yeah, and we will fight them by land, sea, and air, or by air, land, and sea. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we will fight them land and air and sea. That's all I know of it. But so it's I kind of then later on talk show hosts were talking about like how one of our first wars was the Barbary Wars. I was thinking more of say that we were fighting Muslim invaders. Whenever we're talking about like Muslim invaders in this generation. Sweden's a perfect example of the Muslim invaders. But yeah, it's been going on a pretty long time. But with us fighting Muslims who are trying to invade our shores, and they started the slave trade despite popular consensus. I mean, I've gotten into arguments with people saying that we never really set foot into African territory. We just hung around the coastal cities probably, and some slave trader would be like, look at this, we got some black people. You want to buy black people? Yes, you buy the black people. I give you $5. $5 for black people. You get $5. How about $5? That kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm seeing how the slave trade was, and yeah, they were probably the big proponents of the slave trade, despite what any teacher tells you in K through 12 that it's the white man's fault. No, it was the slave traders of that era, and yeah, we ended slavery in the Civil War, but I've seen signs of it going well into the mid 20th century, and it's still going on. So yeah, that's that story. But so how did all this? But yeah, it kind of started with Muslims capturing one of our ships and us going in there and negotiating. George Washington and John Adams were kind of not really doing too much, and then Thomas Jefferson came in and started having patrols and so forth, and we managed to free the captain who I can't even remember, and we were just basically defenseless when it came to the trading, and yeah, it was no more than a skirmish. And when the ships from that little skirmish called the Enterprise, and of course that, which I have to say to to the Star Trek franchise, and I'm grateful for Gene Roddenberry to name his first starship in that franchise. I know he's dead now, but to name it Enterprise and try and keep that that footnote of history alive. But yeah, schools, they never really talk about this point in history about it. I know I should have done more highlighting and so forth, and yeah, but there was like, we had a fort and had a flag there, and that was impossible to take down. So the Muslim invaders we were fighting had a hard time taking that down. Yeah, I know. I do apologize for not really highlighting, annotating, but I think there was one scene in here that kind of real. Like I say, this ain't the usual. This kind of deviates from the usual what we're talking about. So, yeah, this is probably the scene that got me. Yeah, the few weeks later, John Adams, and and they were seated in the front. Adams and Sidi Hajij Abdurrahman seated in front of a roaring fire with 2 servants in attendance. They smoked tobacco from pipes with 6-foot-long stems fit for a walking cane. Adams had promptly written to Jefferson, "It is long since I took a pipe, but we smoked an awful pop, reciprocating whiff for whiff until coffee was brought in." Now that coffee, from what I understand, was super strong. This was no Folgers. This was intense coffee back in the day. And but so I guess I could tell you what happened with some of the. But yeah, a flotilla was sent out that to it was commanded by Richard Dale, Commodore Richard Dale, which consisted of the Philadelphia and the Essex, captained by Samuel Barron, William Bainbridge, respectively, would add additional strength. The 4th vessel, the trim schooner Enterprise. So So that's pretty much what consisted of the first flotilla. Yeah, this is what happens when you don't annotate too much. My next book is going to be pretty short, so that's good. I know I should have put more effort into this. It's kind of like I'm busy with 2 jobs. One's 10-hour-a-week job, the other is a 40-hour-a-week. So Constellation, Gibraltar, the Old Drums of Summer. Oh yeah. So yeah, there was one battle with a ship, and that saw the capture of it, and yes, the Philadelphia. So 15 miles out. Yeah, the Philadelphia hit some rocks, and then some smaller boats from the Tripolitans started to come in, and well, they tried to sink the Philadelphia, but it really didn't happen. And so yeah, I know, like I say, this deviates from the usual stuff, and this was the first book I decided to work with, but hopefully there will be better reads coming along. Next one will be Doctor Who and the Abominable Snowman. It's basically one of the TV serials that the BBC decided to destroy in order to make more room. So I know one episode does survive. I saw it on the VHS of the Troughton years, but it is kind of a disappointment because that was because there's been 2 abominable snowman stories, and not only that, this serial also introduced the great intelligence who was responsible for the Palestine soldiers, like the ones where the mannequins come to life and just wreak havoc in London in the 3rd and 9th Doctor Who stories. So, anyways, it's time for my flight. Time for me to take off. See you again.